She was the best friend, the trusted helper, the woman everyone believed. But behind that calm smile was a killer who murdered two innocent people and framed an innocent husband for her crimes. This is the true story of Pamela Hupp, a case that exposed how lies can destroy lives and how justice can come dangerously late. Pamela Marie Hupp was not the kind of person anyone would easily suspect of committing murder. To most people in Troy, Missouri, she appeared ordinary, soft-spoken, helpful, and dependable. She worked in the insurance industry, lived a quiet suburban life, and often presented herself as a loyal friend. But behind that calm exterior was a calculated and deeply manipulative individual whose crimes would shock the entire United States. Pamela Hupp was born on December 13, 1958. By the early 2000s, she was working as an insurance agent and building relationships with clients that went far beyond professional boundaries. One of those clients was Betsy Faria, a kind-hearted woman battling cancer. Betsy and her husband, Russ Faria, welcomed Pamela into their lives, trusting her not only with insurance matters, but also with personal struggles. Pamela quickly became deeply involved in Betsy's life. She attended medical appointments, helped manage paperwork, and positioned herself as Betsy's closest confidant. Over time, Pamela gained access to Betsy's finances, legal documents, and private decisions. What no one knew at the time was that Pamela had her own agenda. In 2011, Betsy Faria made a shocking decision. She changed her life insurance beneficiary from her husband, Russ, to Pamela Hupp. The policy was worth approximately $150,000. Pamela later claimed that Betsy did this willingly, saying she did not trust her husband. However, many close friends and family members would later dispute this, insisting Betsy and Russ were happily married. On December 27, 2011, Betsy Faria was found brutally murdered in her home. She had been stabbed more than 50 times. The scene was horrifying and immediately raised questions. Despite the violent nature of the crime, Pamela Hupp was one of the first people to speak confidently about what had happened and who she believed was responsible. From the very beginning, Pamela pointed the finger at Russ Faria. She described him as abusive, controlling, and dangerous. Her statements heavily influenced investigators, who quickly focused on Russ as the prime suspect. Despite a lack of physical evidence tying him to the crime, Russ Faria was arrested and later convicted of his wife's murder. While Russ sat in prison, Pamela collected the life insurance money and continued living her life freely. She appeared calm, cooperative, and even supportive of the investigation. But cracks slowly began to appear in her story. Inconsistencies, strange behaviors, and unexplained actions raised quiet suspicions among a few people who refused to believe Russ was guilty. This first lesson introduces the chilling truth about Pamela Hupp: how trust, manipulation, and careful planning allowed her to hide in plain sight. What looked like a tragic domestic murder was actually the beginning of a far more complex and disturbing crime story, one that would take years to fully uncover. After the brutal murder of Betsy Faria on December 27, 2011, the investigation moved quickly but not carefully. The crime scene was shocking. Betsy had been stabbed more than 50 times in her own home. Yet nothing seemed stolen. There were no signs of forced entry, and the house appeared oddly calm for such a violent crime. Investigators immediately looked for the simplest explanation: a domestic dispute gone wrong. Pamela Hupp played a critical role in shaping that narrative. From the very beginning, she told police that Betsy was afraid of her husband, Russ Faria. Pamela claimed that Betsy had confided in her about abuse, threats, and controlling behavior. According to Pamela, Betsy changed her life insurance beneficiary because she feared Russ would kill her. These statements were powerful and damaging. Despite the fact that there was no physical evidence linking Russ to the murder, police heavily relied on Pamela's testimony. They ignored several red flags, including the unusually violent nature of the stabbing and the lack of blood on Russ when he arrived home. Instead, investigators built their case around Pamela's version of events. Russ Faria maintained his innocence from the start. He had a solid alibi. He was at a friend's house with several witnesses during the time of the murder. Phone records and testimonies supported his story. Still, prosecutors argued that Russ left the gathering, committed the murder, and then returned, all without leaving behind convincing physical evidence. In 2013, Russ Faria was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The verdict shocked many who knew the couple. Friends described Russ and Betsy's marriage as loving and supportive, especially during Betsy's battle with cancer. But the jury believed Pamela's emotional testimony, which painted Russ as a violent and abusive husband. While Russ's life collapsed behind prison walls, Pamela Hupp benefited financially. She had already received the $150,000 life insurance payout. She also appeared frequently in the media, calmly defending the conviction and reinforcing her claims about Russ's guilt. To the public, she looked like a grieving friend seeking justice. However, one person was not convinced: attorney Kathleen Zellner, a well-known wrongful conviction advocate. After reviewing the case, Zellner found serious flaws in the investigation. She uncovered evidence that had been ignored, misrepresented, or never tested. More importantly, she began closely examining Pamela Hupp's role, not just as a witness, but as a potential suspect. Zellner discovered inconsistencies in Pamela's statements, unexplained phone activity, and suspicious behavior surrounding the insurance policy. Why would a terminally ill woman leave her life insurance to a friend instead of her husband? Why was Pamela so deeply involved in every aspect of the case? And why did her story keep changing? As Russ Faria sat in prison for a crime he insisted he did not commit, a new investigation quietly began to expose the truth. Attorney Kathleen Zellner and her team took a deep dive into the Betsy Faria case, re-examining every detail that had been overlooked. What they found pointed not to Russ, but directly toward Pamela Hupp. One of the most disturbing discoveries involved Pamela's movements on the day of the murder. Cell phone records placed her near Betsy's home around the time Betsy was killed. This directly contradicted Pamela's earlier statements about her whereabouts. When confronted with this information, Pamela's explanations shifted, creating serious doubt about her credibility. Zellner's team also uncovered evidence that Betsy's life insurance change may have been manipulated. Betsy was extremely ill, heavily medicated, and vulnerable when the documents were signed. Witnesses later stated that Pamela was present during key moments and may have pressured or influenced Betsy's decision. This suggested financial motive, one of the strongest indicators in any murder investigation. Meanwhile, investigators began to notice Pamela's unusual behavior after the murder. She inserted herself aggressively into the investigation, frequently contacting police and prosecutors. She appeared eager to direct attention toward Russ and away from herself. This kind of behavior is often seen in individuals attempting to control the narrative. In 2016, after years of legal battles, Russ Faria's conviction was overturned. A new trial was ordered. This decision sent shockwaves through Missouri's legal system and immediately placed Pamela Hupp under intense scrutiny. For the first time, she was no longer just a witness. She was a person of interest. As attention turned toward Pamela, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Investigators discovered that another person connected to Pamela had died under suspicious circumstances years earlier. In 2011, Louis Gumpenberger, a man with mental and physical disabilities, had been found dead in his home in what appeared to be a staged crime scene. Authorities now believed that Pamela had attempted to frame Russ Faria again, this time by manipulating Gumpenberger into entering his own home and staging it to look like a violent robbery. The plan failed when evidence did not support her story. Instead, it exposed her capacity for calculated violence and deception. In August 2016, Pamela Hupp was arrested for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger. This arrest changed everything. It confirmed that Pamela was not a helpful friend or innocent witness, but a dangerous predator capable of manipulating vulnerable people to protect herself. By the time Pamela Hupp was arrested in 2016, investigators believed they were finally seeing her true face. The case that exposed her most clearly was the murder of Louis Gumpenberger, a crime so calculated that it revealed just how far Pamela was willing to go to save herself. Louis Gumpenberger was a 33-year-old man with significant physical and mental disabilities. He lived alone, relied on daily assistance, and had no known enemies. In August 2016, he was found dead in his home from a single gunshot wound. At first glance, the scene appeared to be a botched robbery or home invasion, but investigators quickly noticed something was wrong. Near Louis' body, police found a handwritten note. The note claimed that Louis had broken into a woman's home, demanding money and threatening to kill her friend named Betsy. The message appeared to connect the crime directly to Betsy Faria's murder, conveniently, pointing suspicion back toward Russ Faria once again. But the story made no sense. Louis Gumpenberger had severe mobility issues and required assistance to walk. The physical actions described in the note, breaking into a home, threatening violence and fleeing, were beyond his capabilities. Even more suspicious was the fact that the woman who reported the alleged break-in was Pamela Hupp herself. Investigators soon uncovered a disturbing truth. Pamela had allegedly lured Lewis to her home by pretending to offer him a job opportunity. Once he arrived, she forced him at gunpoint to write the note, then drove him back to his house and shot him, staging the scene to look like a crime gone wrong. This plan was meant to achieve two things: reinforce Russ Faria's guilt in Betsy's murder and divert attention away from Pamela as a suspect. But instead it did the opposite. Forensic evidence contradicted Pamela's version of events. Surveillance footage, phone records, and the physical limitations of the victim all pointed directly to her. The note itself became one of the strongest pieces of evidence. Its content was too specific, too convenient, and too closely aligned with Pamela's previous accusations. In 2019, Pamela Hupp was convicted of first-degree murder for the killing of Louis Gumpenberger and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, prosecutors described her as a master manipulator who exploited trust, sympathy, and vulnerability to commit murder and avoid responsibility. This conviction had immediate consequences for the Betsy Faria case. With Pamela now proven capable of murder and deception, the foundation of the case against Russ Faria completely collapsed. Public opinion shifted dramatically. What once seemed like a tragic domestic crime was now widely viewed as a carefully executed setup. Pamela Hupp's conviction for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger changed everything, but the final reckoning was still to come. With Pamela now proven to be a calculating killer, the justice system was forced to confront a devastating truth. An innocent man had lost years of his life because of lies that were never properly questioned. In 2017, after spending nearly 4 years in prison, Russ Faria was officially acquitted of his wife Betsy's murder. The jury found him not guilty on all charges during his retrial. The courtroom moment was emotional and powerful, symbolizing not just personal freedom for Russ, but a public admission that the system had failed him. The spotlight then turned fully toward Pamela Hupp. In July 2021, she was formally charged with first-degree murder in the death of Betsy Faria. Unlike before, prosecutors now had a clear narrative, strong evidence, and a proven pattern of behavior. Pamela was no longer seen as a grieving friend. She was the central suspect. Facing overwhelming evidence, Pamela Hupp pleaded guilty in August 2021 to first-degree murder for Betsy Faria's death. She received a second life sentence, to be served consecutively, with her existing life sentence for Louis Gumpenberger's murder. This ensured that she would never be eligible for parole. During her plea, Pamela admitted to stabbing Betsy Faria to death in her home in 2011. She also admitted to manipulating the insurance policy and framing Russ Faria for the crime. For the first time, the full truth was placed on record, ending years of speculation and pain for the victims' families. The Pamela Hupp case exposed deep flaws in the criminal justice system. Investigators relied too heavily on a single witness. Prosecutors ignored contradictory evidence, and confirmation bias led authorities to build a case around a narrative rather than facts. It took years, relentless legal work, and the courage to question official conclusions to correct those mistakes. This case also highlighted how dangerous manipulation can be when paired with trust. Pamela Hupp did not appear violent or threatening. She appeared helpful, sympathetic, and reliable. That illusion allowed her to commit murder and nearly get away with it twice. Lesson 5 closes the story with a sobering reminder: justice is not automatic. It must be pursued carefully, honestly, and without prejudice. The Pamela Hupp case stands as a warning and a lesson about truth, accountability, and the devastating consequences when lies are allowed to replace evidence.